The Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Arts National Arts Center is a structure set up to ensure training of artists in Benin. The drought in the Horn of Africa is forcing many nomadic farmers to seek a new life elsewhere. A federal high court in Abuja delivers judgment on a request seeking to stop the conduct of the forthcoming elections in Nigeria. Good afternoon, our dear viewers. Welcome to the 1 p.m. news edition, coming to you live and direct from Golfe TV AFRICA, here in the city of Cotonou with Hazel OGOIGBE. Now to the news in detail, starting from the African scene. Coal-rich boats Energy Stop South Africa will not immediately abandon its fossil-fueled electricity generating plants as it transitions to cleaner forms of power, President Cyril Ramaphosa stated on Sunday. Now, South Africa, one of the world's largest polluters, which generates about 80% of its electricity through coal, is in grip of an energy crisis. It has been blamed on aging power plants. Still on the African scene, the drought in the Horn of Africa is forcing many nomadic herders to seek a new life elsewhere. Increasing numbers are now leading a sedentary existence, relying on humanitarian aid in cities or camps for internally displaced people.
The drought in the Horn of Africa is forcing many nomadic herders to seek a new life elsewhere. Increasing numbers are now leading a sedentary existence, relying on humanitarian aid in cities or camps for internally displaced people known as IDPs. The last 5 rainy seasons since the end of 2020 have failed.
Very happy. I had my children, animals that provided milk and meat. We moved freely from one place to another, and now all our wealth is gone. We are gathered here with my children. Now people's lives are in danger. The majority of people have left the village because of starvation, and those that remain here have nothing.
Triggering the worst drought in 4 decades in Ethiopia, Somalia, and Kenya. Many are now considering a complete lifestyle change. Others, however, are reluctant about embarking on a new life.
I have decided to move from a life of shepherd to a new way of life. I want to start a business, even if it is a small business, just to take care of my family. I don't know how to do anything other than being a nomadic shepherd. I'm not educated and I do not know how to farm. This is the only way I know to survive.
According to the United Nations, drought has plunged 12 million people into acute food insecurity in Ethiopia alone, where deadly conflict has also ravaged the north of the country. In a report published in January, the United Nations Humanitarian Agency said that since 2021, more than 4.5 million livestock have died and 30 million are now at risk.
Away from that, a federal high court in Abuja delivers judgment on a request seeking to stop the conduct of the forthcoming presidential election scheduled for the 25th of February in Nigeria. A federal high court in Abuja, Nigeria will on Monday deliver judgment on a request seeking to stop the conduct of the forthcoming presidential elections in Nigeria scheduled for the 25th of February 2023. The court will also decide whether to sack the president, Major General Muhammadu Buhari, over alleged illegalities in the 2019 presidential elections. The judgment bill to be delivered by Justice Inyang Ekwo is based on a suit filed by the presidential candidate of the Hope Democratic Party in the 2019 election, Chief Ambrose Owuru. Owuru had instituted legal actions against President Buhari and the Independent National Electoral Commission, asking the court to declare him the winner of the election. A notice for the judgment delivery cited on Friday by journalists at the Federal Ministry of Justice in Abuja indicated that a verdict will be delivered by 9 a.m. by Justice Ekwo. The notice was served on the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice Abubakar Malami San. It was reported that the Rivers State-born presidential candidate had asked the court to declare him the winner of the 2019 presidential election. Still on the news in brief, crossing over to this very disheartening news. An unarmed black man is killed as a result of a videotaped police beating. Now, officers implicated have been sacked and criminal charges are quickly brought against the offending police after a thorough review of the facts. Now, investigation, accountability and charges. Now, this is often the case of most black citizens that can hope for as the death continues nationwide. The police have killed roughly 3 people per day consistently since 2020, according to academics and advocates for police reforms who track such death. Moving over to this topic on leprosy. Now, many people think it has been eradicated, but the Hansen disease, more commonly known as leprosy, has disabled millions of people worldwide. Over 100,000 new cases globally are still reported every year. Now, on World Leprosy Day, our partners DW took a look at what is being done to finally wipe out this terrible, potentially disfiguring condition.
Humanity has lived with leprosy for millennia, though throughout most of history contracting it meant a long, debilitating death sentence. The crippling disease has been treatable for around 80 years now. The symptoms generally first appear on the skin and mucous membranes, where the condition causes characteristic lesions. If the illness advances untreated, it can lead to deformities. It's caused by rod-shaped bacteria that are closely related to the ones that cause tuberculosis. In fact, being vaccinated against TB provides partial protection against contracting leprosy. Like other bacterial infections, it can be treated with antibiotics. A multi-drug therapy of 3 different medications cures it in individuals, but the disease remains endemic in some countries. Though the disease has grown rare in Europe and the Middle East, around 20,000 people every year still contract it in both the Americas, most in Brazil, and Africa. But the lion's share of new cases now occur in Southeast Asia, particularly in India.
Most of the new infections that we now see globally are largely from 3 countries, Brazil, India, and Indonesia. What happens is that leprosy is always clustered in certain communities or certain vulnerable groups or even certain geographic groups. These are very remotely located populations in remote geographies and so on, who have less access to treatment, etc. So it's in those milieu that the infection continues to thrive.
Although the bacteria that cause leprosy aren't really highly infectious, untreated people can spread it, and crowded living conditions increase the risk. In some places, patients have difficulty accessing the antibiotics, even though they're provided for free by the World Health Organization. And the stigma associated with the disease means many seek to hide their condition for as long as possible. Those factors and others continue to make it difficult to wipe out leprosy completely.
You're still tuned into Golfe TV Africa. It's still the 1 p.m. news. We're moving over to the newspaper review segment. And today we're going to be starting as usual with the Nigerian paper, The Nation Nigeria. And I'm going to be starting from this story that is one of the headlines that says, banks fail to dispense cash in holes ATM terminals. And this is also saying that POS operators and hawkers sell Naira notes in cities. And Emefiele's actions political, says Reps leader. Still talking about the concept of the Naira note and the deadline that has been given by Nigerians to stop spending the old Naira notes. Now, there's been various challenges, which I explained yesterday. And right now, the situational report is saying that banks and ATMs are not even dispensing the new Naira note. POS are actually, some people are even selling it, making the new Naira note very scarce. Now back to the pages of The Nation Nigeria. This story says how overvoting voided Ademola Adeleke's victory. Ademola Adeleke was actually the person that won the gubernatorial elections in Osun State, but right now the tribunal has brought out the results and they voided his election. Now, still on the pages of The Nation Nigeria, this is talking about politics, and he's saying, Tinubu is speaking here and he's saying, we will use oil to develop Akwa Ibom, on the pages of The Nation Nigeria. Now, still on The Nation Nigeria, let's just zoom a bit on the story. And this story is talking about this, and it says, protesters raise the APC office, Tinubu Shetima Oshu Center. For more of that story, you could check the pages of The Nation Nigeria. Crossing away from The Nation Nigeria, moving over to the pages of the Namibian Sun. Let's see the stories that are making the rounds on the front page of the Namibian Sun. So on the Namibian Sun today, the top story reads, and that is the story I'm going to be taking on the pages of the Namibian Sun. On the top page of the Namibian Sun, it says, Indian Uhungu joint venture, and that is the story I'm reading that says, Indians in Uhungu Vungu joint ventures, the first green scheme snapped up after cabinet decision in Namibia. And still on the pages of the Namibian Sun, it says, MPs receive 72 airtime too, and this story is saying, I did not snitch on Nehindo, brother speaks, on the pages of the Namibian Sun newspaper. Now, crossing away from the Namibian Sun, let's see the top stories making the rounds on the front page of the Guardian Post Cameroon. As usual, you're still tuned into Golfe TV and Africa, and it's still the 1 p.m. news, but this is the newspaper review segment. Now, on the pages of the Guardian Post Cameroon, this story is talking about annual general meeting, and it's saying Ntarinko Credit Union scrapes off charges on savings, withdrawals, account openings, bank attestation, and also salary transfer. And still on the pages of the Guardian Post, this is saying that Trade Minister inaugurates CSPH constructed Nguti modern fuel station. Now, above that story, this story reads, what I told Ngole Imbue, the minister, Elungpo speaks, and talking about the senatorial elections, urgent need for democratic change in CPDM, on the pages of the Guardian Post Cameroon. Now, crossing away from the pages of the Guardian Post Cameroon, we are still, of course, on the African scene, seeing the stories that are making the round on the top page of the African scene. Let's cross over to the pages of the front page, Liberia. Now, on the front page, Liberia today, the top story reads this, and it says, give counties, this is the story I'm reading on the front page. It says, give counties control, on the pages of the front page. And I'm just going to zoom that a bit to be able to see clearly those stories. And it says schools outstanding experiment falter and teachers as they want local authorities to take charge, and they're saying give counties control. Still on the pages of the front page Liberia, this story is talking about this, and it's saying taking a page of EJ's book, President Weah announces second-term bid in annual message, rallies citizens and support as he catalogs achievement, second-term quest. Now, there's been a lot of conflict going on in Liberia. You know, people are talking about the hike in food prices. At a time, there was even full scarcity. And now President Weah is coming out to say he's coming back for a second tenure. Now, the questions we always need to ask ourselves is, have you done well enough to take your country from where it is to where it ought to be before you decide to come up for a second tenure? Is it just an opportunity to gather money, or is it actually an opportunity to add value to your society? This is the question people are asking in Liberia. I'm going to be crossing away from the pages of the front page Liberia, apparently still on the African scene. Let's go back to Nigeria. Let's see the stories that are making the rounds on the front page of This Day Nigeria. Now, on the front page of This Day Nigeria, okay, I have to clean this and clean this so we'll be able to see clearly. All right, on the front page of This Day Nigeria, it says again, INEC extends PVC collection deadline by 1 week. That is the story I just finished reading. And I talked about the fact that Nigerians are going through a whole lot, because for you to exercise your franchise as a Nigerian, you need to have your permanent voters card. And for you to have that, you need to collect it from the office of INEC. Now, presently, Nigerians are standing in a long queue, but there's a lot of difficulty. There's a whole lot of disorganization in INEC offices. And right now, INEC has said, okay, we understand what you're going through. We're going to extend the collection date to 1 week. But the question every single Nigerian is asking right now is, would 1 week be enough to handle the long queues and the crowds of Nigerians that have decided to collect their PVCs in order to enable them exercise their franchise? That is a rhetorical question that only INEC can respond to. Still on the pages of This Day Nigeria, it says Buhari allays concerns over shortage of naira notes and says the CBN is working to eliminate chaos. On the pages of The Nation, This Day Nigeria. Now, still on the pages of the This Day Nigeria, let's scroll up a bit. It says 60 hearty cheers, and if you look, you would see one of the famous pastors in Nigeria, Pastor Paul Adefarasi, and they are saying 60 hearty cheers to the pastor, Pastor Paul Adefarasi. Now we're crossing over to one of my best newspapers, and that is the pages of the Citizen Tanzania. I like reading the pages of the Citizen Tanzania because President Samia is a woman, and I'm all for the fact that women can do great wonders in politics. And apart from that, the fact that Tanzania is making a whole lot of progress is also really commendable on the part of President Samia. All right, let's get started on the pages of the Citizen Tanzania. This story talks about banks rake in 1.6 trillion shillings net profit in record display. And if you look at the story, it says net profit for commercial banks rose by about 400 billion shillings last year to surpass the 1 trillion mark for the first time in Tanzania's history, with the success being attributed to pro-business policies. This is exactly what I was talking about, the fact that a president needs to create the right system for investors to come in. Since President Samia, a woman, I'm bold to say she's a woman, a female president, became the president of Tanzania, Tanzania has been entering into profitable partnerships. The business climate has been favorable. There's been investors. And now one of the benefits, or rather one of the dividends of a very comfortable climate, is that the bank rakes in 1.6. I have to underline that because that's a whole lot of money. 1.16 trillion net profit in record dispute. Now, still on the pages of the Citizen Tanzania, this story says Ramani's billion-dollar vision, and Indian company responds to U.S. firm fraud allegation on the pages of the Citizen Tanzania. And still on the Citizen Tanzania, this story says, government puts diplomatic community a notice on the pages of the Citizen Tanzania. And then, of course, I have one last daily for today. That is the pages of the Daily Guide Ghana. Now, on the Daily Guide Ghana today, the pages of the Daily Guide Ghana. On the Daily Guide Ghana today, the top stories is talking about the educational system. And on the Daily Guide Ghana, the story is reading, and it says, it's grabbed over school placement expose. Now, let me just give you a brief history of the school placement expose. Now, in some African countries, you know, and I will use my country, Nigeria, as an example. Sometimes when you want to get into secondary school or even want to get into universities owned by the federal government, you have some people that would say, give me a particular amount of money and I'll be able to connect you, make sure your name comes out on the list. Sometimes parents are caught up in this web and they give money to fraudsters that collect their money, siphon their money, and run away with the money. Some other times, the people are highly connected and they actually give them the admission. So that is the situation of things in Ghana right now, and it's saying it's grabbed over school placement expose. Now, still on the pages of the Daily Guide Ghana, President Nana Akufo-Addo is saying, be patient. Nana pleads with Ghanaian. Ghana is experiencing high inflation. The prices of goods, the prices of services, the standard of living in Ghana has really increased, really making life difficult for Ghanaians. And right now, the president of Ghana is speaking and is saying, be patient, says President Nana Akufo-Addo. And still on the pages of the Daily Guide Ghana, this story says, Kia Abosom Dom's wife. That is a story on page 6 of the pages of the Daily Guide Ghana. And the last one of the list, the story reads, over 30,000 passports left to rot. If you know you're curious, you want to know why the passports are left to rot, you can check the pages of the Daily Guide Ghana. And I'm concluding today's edition of the African Newspaper Review. We're going back to the news. Stay tuned to Golfe TV Africa. We're just days back to the news. We're just days before old Naira notes had to be phased out. Nigerian lawmakers and the Senate have asked the central bank to delay putting new Naira notes into circulation until the end of July. The officials are concerned about the widespread report of a scarcity of the newly redesigned Naira notes.
Zamzam Omar says she used to hear rosy stories about life in refugee camps in Kenya. She arrived at the Dadaab refugee camp with her 5 children 6 months ago after a bomb attack near their Mogadishu home injured and traumatized her 10-year-old son. But life here has not been what she expected.
We were given only food tokens. We have not been recognized and received refugee IDs or anything else.
Omar is among the nearly 100,000 refugees who have fled to Kenya to escape drought and conflict in Somalia. But because Kenya has banned the registration of new refugees at the crowded Dadaab camp, new arrivals have had to live in temporary settlements outside the camp with limited amenities.
Most of these lands where they are settling lack the basic services. For example, there are no wash services. What I mean is that there is no water, there is lack of latrines, sanitation is an issue there, Of course, there are no schools and there are even no hospitals. So the situation there is bad.
The Kenyan government has periodically threatened to close the Dadaab camps entirely. But now, to ease congestion, the Kenyan government has approved the reopening of 2 sub-camps that were closed in 2016, E42 and Cambios. Aid agencies say the move is long overdue.
WFP is already alerting us that their capacities are being overstretched because all those people are coming to already existing camps, most of which are now reaching 100,000 each. You know, each of the camps now is close to 100,000 each, whereas the capacity is way below that. And WFP is telling us that by February, they won't be able to add more people to the list, which leads us to the necessity of opening new camps.
Omar says she is hopeful.
I would like space in that new camp where I can get security and basic services like water, shelter, and education for my children.
Currently, Kenya's government says only registered refugees will be settled in the new sites. So, unregistered refugees like Omar wait and hope new arrivals will eventually be recognized as refugees too. Kenya is already one of Africa's top refugee hosting countries with over 500,000 refugees, mainly from Somalia and South Sudan.
Away from that, throngs of human rights activists and politicians came to bid farewell to Thulani Maseko on the 29th of January 2023. Gathered at the deceased home in Western Eswatini, they paid him a last homage. The human rights lawyer was a leading figure in the push for Eswatini, an absolute monarchy, to transition into a multi-party democracy. Throngs of human rights activists and politicians came to bid farewell to Thulani Maseko on the 29th of January 2023. Gathered at the deceased home in Western Eswatini, they paid him a last homage. The human rights lawyer was a leading figure in the push for Eswatini, an absolute monarchy, to transition into a multi-party democracy. Thulani Maseko was shot dead in his home last week, hours after a speech of defiance by the king against opponents of his absolute rule. Local and international groups called for an independent and effective investigation into the killing of this human rights activist in Eswatini. 52 years old Thulani Maseko is survived by his wife and 4 children. At the time of his death, he was working as a lawyer for 2 people facing trial for offenses allegedly committed during the arrest in 2021, the United Nations stated. The country was engulfed in pro-democracy protests 2 years ago, when there were reports of state violence against demonstrators, and King Mswati III was accused of repressing any opposition. The Supreme Council for Sharia in Nigeria has asked the federal government of Nigeria, as well as 1 million Nigerians, to prevail on the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) to hold both the presidential and governorship elections on the same day. Now, the council noted that a call became necessary to avoid violence at staggered polls. More information in the following commentary. The Supreme Council for Sharia in Nigeria has asked the federal government, as well as 1 million Nigerians, to prevail on the Independent National Electoral Commission to hold both the presidential and governorship elections on the same day. The council noted that a call became necessary to avoid violence at staggered polls. The presidential and National Assembly elections are scheduled for the 25th of February 2023, while the governorship and state houses of assembly elections are scheduled for the 11th of March 2023. However, the council said there could be violence if the elections were staggered, adding that some desperate politicians were already warming up to cause a crisis to stop the elections. The Secretary General of the Supreme Council for Sharia in Nigeria, Nafiu Baba Ahmed, while addressing a press conference in Kaduna on Sunday, stated that a security source confirmed to the council that security agencies might not be able to withstand the looming political violence. Baba Ahmed said, there is a high probability of the second election not holding because of the violence from the first election. It is not going to be feasible. The first election is the presidential and National Assembly elections, We fear that in light of the precarious security situation in Nigeria and the fact that security agencies have admitted they are overstretched, it is quite possible, in fact highly probable, that some desperate politicians who might lose the elections will trigger political violence to the extent that the subsequent elections may not hold. And our dear viewers, this is where we conclude today's news edition. To end the news edition, here is a recap of our top stories. We saw that drought on the Horn of Africa is forcing many nomadic herders to seek a new life elsewhere. We also saw that a federal high court in Abuja will deliver judgment on a request seeking to stop the conduct of the forthcoming elections. Thanks for tuning in. I am Hazel OGOIGBE. Enjoy the rest of your day.